Well, we want to ask now, how do we create the education for the future right now? We have some game changers with us who will help with all of this. In fact, they are educators who might be right down the street from you. They're creating great opportunities for teachers and for students, all with the help of technology. They'll share their very practical stories of how you take that first shaky step and how you get to those end goals. And we chose these leaders specifically because they've happened to lead very successful teams throughout their technology rollouts, and also because their districts have very diverse profiles and goals. So let me start by introducing Joel Handler. He is the Director of Technology. Hi, Joel, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Let me finish up with your intro here. He's the Director of Technology at Hillsborough Public Schools in New Jersey. He's led the technology turnaround there for 11 years. It is a medium-sized district with about 7,500 students. And then we are going to move down to South Carolina. Claudia Edwards is the Deputy Superintendent at Fairfield Public Schools in South Carolina. Hi, Claudia. How you doing?
Hi, Jill.
Good to connect with you. Now, Claudia has been in that position for 4 years. It's a small rural district with about 3,000 students. She led a system-wide reboot there with tablets for students and also what they call teacher gurus. So we'll have more on that in a bit. We also want to welcome Valerie Truesdale. She is the Chief of Technology, Personalization, and Engagement at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools in North Carolina. How are you doing, Valerie?
Better.
Good. Hi, everyone.
Terrific to see you. Now, that's a large urban district with 144,000 students. They kicked off a technology overhaul in 2012. You may have noticed these educators make up a small, medium, and large-sized districts, so you may see yourself among these, and that may help. We picked them for a purpose. All right, let's start now. And the first question I have, and this is going to go to all of our panelists because I think this is something a lot of our viewers will definitely want to be hearing. But Joel, I'll ask you to start first. Why was it time to make a change and to bring technology into education? Is there a story or a moment you can share?
I guess back around 2008, we started seeing there was this kind of divide that students would be coming into school and they would power down, if you will. Technology in the schools was kind of an afterthought. It was kind of a cool thing. It was this, we like to call it the special lesson, that the students would maybe once a month, once every 2 months, they would go down to the computer lab and they would do this special fun lesson. They would go, whoa, this is great. We're going to the lab. We're going to do some technology. And then after that lesson or the few days of lessons in the lab, they go back to their classroom and forget all about using technology. And we kind of saw that as there was this disconnect because out in the real world, as soon as they left school, they would start to get on their smartphones because smartphones started becoming popular then, and technology at home and using it. And creating this online presence and getting access to digital information, but again, outside the school. So we started seeing that it really depended on whose teacher you were, what school you were. We also saw that certain schools had more money from parent groups and so forth, and they would fundraise, so they would have more technology in their schools than others. And we saw this as a problem. And so that, to us, was the catalyst why we had to change the culture to technology changing from something special to being part of the normal culture.
And that is so key. That's certainly what we've been hearing throughout the day. Claudia, I'm going to ask you next. I know you've talked about closing that digital divide.
Well, I will tell you, back in 2012, our state was transitioning to the Common Core. And we knew as a result of this transition to the Common Core, we needed to start thinking about what device could really help our district and our students have a very seamless transition to the Common Core. And so we felt that by utilizing or obtaining the Google Chromebook, we felt that this single device could really help to not only transform and prepare our students for transition to online assessments, but also it could as well transform the learning that's taking place in our classrooms. So that for us was the single catalyst that really helped us move forward in making that transition to a more digital environment.
Okay. And Valerie, what was your story or moment when you decided to bring technology into education?
So we served as a catalyst, a tremendous effort in 2012 when a very large number of citizens and teachers and educators came together to write a very bold strategic plan Goal 1 of the strategic plan for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools calls for us to maximize student achievement in a 21st century learning environment for all students to graduate career and college ready. The problem was, with a 21st century learning environment, none of our schools were 100% wireless. We had some pilots in a couple of classrooms scattered all over our 164 schools that serve, we're very honored to serve 145,000 children in Mecklenburg County. So we had some pilots, but we didn't have any school 100% wireless ready to implement technology and digital tools in the classroom so that students could have a 21st century learning environment. It's really an equity issue. So we began to look at building the infrastructure so that when we had the funds to support devices, we would have enough bandwidth and connectivity to be able to do it well.
All right, now I know a lot of people are sitting out there and listening and they're thinking, okay, but what do I do? How do I take that first step? So if you can talk a little bit about what is the first step you took to get started on the journey. Claudia, can you start with that?
One of the first steps we took was, first of all, to gain buy-in from all of our stakeholders. And these stakeholders consisted of our board members, district level leadership, along with our principals and our classroom teachers. And by developing that level of buy-in, we felt very comfortable with moving toward actually shifting the paradigm, so to speak. We recognized when we decided to embark on this initiative, this digital learning initiative, we knew that many individuals would have somewhat of a little anxiety as it relates to moving toward the cloud. For instance, when we started this journey, we had one particular parent who was very vocal critic. And he, of course, was very accustomed to the traditional PC. And of course, he wanted, because he works in the traditional workplace with the PC, he wanted his son or daughter to have that same experience. But I can tell you now, 3 years later, that this particular parent is one of our strongest supporters of our digital learning initiative. So for any type of huge type of disruption to education, as such, this particular digital learning initiative, I would highly recommend that you start from the top and involve as many stakeholders as possible and get their buy-in, because their buy-in is critical to ensuring that this program is sustainable for years to come.
I think Michael Fullen was talking about that earlier. He called them the change leaders, and those are the people you really need to focus on. Valerie, I know you touched on your first steps a little bit in your last answer, but if you can take this one as well, and I know that you talked a lot about the infrastructure was really the first step you took as well.
We did. We had really a 3-level approach. One was to build the infrastructure, the access points, making sure we had the connectivity and the bandwidth, and that our teachers had devices. We had not issued laptops to teachers heretofore to make sure they had the tools to do their jobs. That was one parallel track. Working at the same time, we began to develop a group of teachers that would be interested, the early adopters, if you will. Michael Fullen talks about the change agents and identifying those folks. We did that with our personalized learning schools and began to teach our teachers how to cultivate blended learning environments for students and personalize their learning. And at the same time, just as we just heard from Claudia, build community support for the idea of our students being connected to the world, so that when we had the connectivity, which took 2 solid years to build out the infrastructure, that when we were ready to put devices in the hands of students, that we had the foundation to be very successful.
All right, thanks, Valerie. And Joel, what was your first step?
Yeah, very similar to both Valerie and Claudia, is that we sat down and we said, this is not about the technology. It's a learning initiative. It's a transformative learning initiative. Technology is just a tool as part of that. So we set up 3 goals that we were going to follow in our district. And we said, we want to make sure students can match those 3 goals. And we have them as globalizing the curriculum, asynchronous learning, and then the creation, collaboration, and publication of digital content. So we set those down and said, that's what we want to do. Then we kind of went to all of our stakeholders, and that was very important for us, that we got teachers involved, we got parents, we got principals, administrators, IT staff, we got everyone involved, so that no matter what decisions we made, we knew it was across the board. And some of the things that we looked at were other districts. We kind of went around and we started visiting other districts that were doing either one-to-one or some form of initiatives like this, and said, what were they doing? And things that we definitely learned were there was a lot of talk about, people spend a lot of money on technology, and there was no training behind it. So there would be lots of technology there, but what was happening with it, it basically became very glorified browsing the internet or just typing. And then we saw other things where, they spent a lot of money on technology, and all this technology went to the students' hands, but it couldn't do what the curriculum wanted it to do. So we wanted to make sure we avoided those. So, we visited a lot of the schools, and then very similar to what Valerie did, the first thing we did was we wanted to make sure the infrastructure was in place. So we put out wireless everywhere. We gave teachers laptops, and we put projectors in classrooms. That was our first steps to making sure we can kind of get this initiative off the ground.
And this is going to be a little bit of a follow-up question to that first step question, and it is that you all had different approaches to pilot and deployment. So how long did the rollouts take? And Joel, why don't we start with you?
So we had on our larger initiative where we looked at in grades 5 through 12 doing one-to-one with Chromebooks for students. We started with a two-step approach. One was this idea of getting pilots and rolling out pilot programs over several years to see what works. We didn't really know at the time that there was the direction we were going. And then our second step was finding the right mix of teachers and getting staff who were involved. So starting with step one, or phase one, I guess, will be, and that was a 4-step process of, first we started with a very small pilot. We looked at 4 classrooms with just different types of tablets in them, and it was really around a very particular math application that met our curriculum needs. And we started with those with one-to-one and said, what were the outcomes we get from that? And we learned some very specific things. We got very clear results from that, especially with positive feedback from the students. We saw organizational skills. We saw some academic improvements. We said, okay, it's definitely worth pursuing. So then the next year we went and we scaled up. We said, let's go 10% across the board, students grades 5 through 12. And that 10% was a really exploratory year. We said, let's try all kinds of things. We looked at different devices, and we saw excitement levels in the students skyrocket. We saw increased organizational skills. We saw collaborative writing starting to happen. And these were the things that really said, hey, this is a working system. So then the following year, we said, now that we know this is working and this is the direction we want to go with our learning initiative, we said, can we actually scale this? So then next year we looked at, let's go to 20%. Can we sustain the program? Is it something that we can actually do? That's a lot of students. We're talking close to 1,000 students now. Is that something we can do in our district? So we went to, like I said, 20% of our students. And then once we knew that we could sustain the program, we figured out what we needed to do. We went to full 100% of our students in grades 5 through 12, moving forward with the one-to-one initiative. In terms of our staffing, what we did was we didn't pick the most tech-savvy staff. We looked for volunteers. We asked for who's interested in trying this piloting program out, as we scaled up over the years. And we looked specifically for teacher leaders, the good teachers that kind of other teachers look to and say, wow, they're really good. They're the kind of teacher I want to aspire to. And we specifically didn't choose the tech-savvy teachers because we knew that if Johnny, who is a tech-savvy teacher down the hall, let's say, was really good, everyone looked at him and said, of course, Johnny can do it. Johnny can do anything with technology. We wanted to make sure we had teachers who are the ones who kind of say, I don't know about this technology stuff, but they're really good teachers. And those are the ones we kind of helped, kind of pulled into the program early on.
All right, I love that, teacher leaders. And Claudia, I know you focused on that as well in your pilot and deployment.
Yes, back in 2012, when we elected to move forward, I literally asked our principals to identify some teachers who were willing to jump off that cliff with me. And then those 30 committed educators, those teachers, members of my own team, committed themselves to come to our district office and actually participate in 30 hours of professional development on a Saturday up front. So prior to us actually deploying the devices into the classrooms, teachers had an opportunity to have some intimate time with the device, with the Google Apps and to really figure out how they in turn wanted to integrate the tools into their classroom settings to help maximize student learning. And I think for us, that was the major game changer in the fact that we now have teachers who felt comfortable with the technology, can in turn look at their lesson plans and determine how they want to integrate these tools into the classrooms. And for example, we had our teachers, those teachers who were now termed Google Chromies, for those teachers who decided to jump off the cliff with me, had t-shirts. And those t-shirts basically stated, "Got Google." And so that level of excitement when the teachers actually wore their t-shirts caused other teachers to ask questions. Well, how can I get a t-shirt? What can I do to help become a part of this Gone Google initiative? And when that level of excitement occurred with the teachers in our classrooms, the teachers then became teachers of the technology and in turn helped supported the classroom teachers in the integration of the technology in their classrooms. And the one thing that I loved throughout this entire process, and it's still occurring today, is that now we have a level of commitment toward this initiative versus a level of compliance. And I say that because now we have teachers who want to do it because they see it's the right thing for our students versus having to be told to do something. And I think that in itself, with this level of commitment, will ensure that this digital learning initiative with the integration of the Google Apps for Education tools will move forward and move our district forward as it relates to the technology integration into the classroom.
That's so key what you just said, the commitment over compliance. And I also, the favorite phrase I had was, these Google Chromies jumped off the cliff with me. That was a terrific image there. And Valerie, I know that you started in the middle school. That was how you rolled it out. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
We can. So once we started to look for our early adopter schools, we assessed the readiness of our schools based on an application. Any of the 47 schools could apply in the middle grades. And we assessed them on 7 factors of readiness: leadership readiness, teacher readiness, student readiness, technology integration, etc. We had 7 different factors that we developed from the ISTE standards and assessed the application from each of those schools. Emerged as adopt schools that would go one-to-one with Chromebooks, and we began to deploy Chromebooks into those schools. 32,500 Chromebooks were deployed in the early fall of 2014, and we are now, all of our middle schools have Chromebooks accessible for students in grades 6, 7, and 8. Why did we begin in the middle? We began in the middle because several years ago, the state of North Carolina had not refreshed our science or social studies textbooks in a number of years, so we purchased a supplemental tech book from Discovery Education. So the middle schools already were using some digital content and had some energy around that in a few carts in each school. So there was a propensity to use digital tools as well. Our student data indicated that we really did need to kick up the student engagement in our middle grades, that would make a big difference. As a result, I will tell you anecdotally that the classroom discipline referrals have dropped dramatically since we've deployed the Chromebooks, because students really are significantly more engaged in their learning during class.
Okay, and I want to ask also, what's an example of something you did to ensure that teachers were inspired and supported? Claudia, do you want to start with this?
One of the things that we did, as I mentioned earlier, we had the Google Chromies actually be paired with a member of the leadership team. Now, we have a very small committed team here in Fairfield County, and when it was time for the actual deployment, we went and worked alongside the classroom teacher during the actual deployment process. And so the teachers, when they had an opportunity to actually open up the Chromebooks with the students, they had another pair of hands in the classroom, because you can imagine for a teacher who has 28 students, 28 devices in a classroom, there was a high level of anxiety. And so because the teacher had another member of my staff working alongside them, it helped to ensure that all of the kinks were worked out, and it enabled the teachers' anxiety level to really to be lessened during this actual deployment. And so I think that in itself was important, that they felt like, you know what, they're committed to us for the long haul. They want to make sure they want to make sure that we in fact are supporting them on this initiative.
Okay, and Joel, I'd like to ask you the same question about things that you did, examples of things you did to help inspire and support teachers.
So as we rolled out the pilot programs and then scaling up to the full 100%, we encouraged teachers to try new things. We supplied tech support staff that were there to help work with them and guide them, potentially go in and help co-teach a lesson if need be. And we gave this very strong message to teachers that we actually expect you to fail. If you don't fail at trying lessons, that means you're not actually trying new things. You're not pushing the envelope. So there was this culture that it was okay to fail, and actually you can learn from that, and you can actually try new things and expand from that. So that was definitely something that we pushed forward with our teachers. And some really interesting stories kind of came out of that. I had one teacher come to me, and I was in her room, and she kind of came up to me while the class was going on. The kids were all doing their stuff and everything. She goes, I feel kind of strange. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't feel like I know what to do anymore. I'm just kind of helping them out. I'm not guiding the class anymore. I said, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. This is perfect. The kids were just so engaged. They were so focused on what they were doing. And she had changed her whole mindset from being in the front of the room, kind of teaching the lesson, to kind of guiding students and working with them as they were progressing along the activities of that day. Another very interesting story, as we kind of experimented with teachers and told them, try things and explore and see what works and what doesn't. We have other districts have come in over the past few years to see what we were doing in our district and see the great things that are happening here. And so we had an assistant superintendent come in from a neighboring district, and they were going around and they came into one of these rooms that we're piloting. That was one of our pilot rooms. And the students had all their desks arranged in various configurations, and they were in groups. It almost looked like, to me, kind of like a startup company or a startup culture. Kids were sitting at their desks in different places. Some were in the beanbag chairs in the back. Some were on the heating unit on the side. And he went over to one of the students and kind of tapped him on the shoulder and said, don't you find it kind of strange that your back is to the front of the room? And the kid, and this is around March already in the year, kind of looks up at him and goes, that's the front of the room? Like, this is just how we work. There's no front of the room. We just kind of do what we need to do and get the job done, and learn along the way. So those are kind of the things that we really supplied a lot of support for our teachers, make sure that there was a lot of professional development. There was, staff available to them, and tech staff as well, that we made sure that technology was always there, was always available, and always working. So.
Some great points, Joel. And I liked what you said about making mistakes, because we've been talking earlier about we need to reward students when they make mistakes. Let them know it's okay to fail, because they'll keep trying. And we have to do that with teachers as well. It's all right. Yes. We can make mistakes. It's all part of the deal. All right, we have all of these audience questions starting to pile in here, so I want to be sure we turn to some of the audience questions. And this is a question for every one of our panel members. I'm going to start with you, Joel. A viewer named Tiffany asks, what have been the biggest challenges?
Big challenge was really time. It takes time to learn, and get used to this new kind of environment. So you got to kind of work with it and allow teachers to kind of explore and find their niche. We like to call them sometimes aha moments. So after several months, all of a sudden something aha clicks, and you start to see a spin on it. We actually had a pilot teacher who was not really in favor of the whole idea of the learning initiative and the one-to-one. And he kind of came aboard because his team was coming aboard and they had to, and so forth. But he was playing along and doing it. And it was about a couple months into the year, and the students were working, and he started a lecture at the beginning of class, and the students were going to break and work on some collaborative projects. And so this first 10 minutes or so, he's walking around the room, and the students are there working, and he notices two students have their cursor kind of moving around on the same document. So he kind of goes over to them at the end of the lecture part as they break, and he kind of says, I'll see you guys after class for detention. And they're like, what did we do wrong? And he's like, well, you guys were not paying attention to me. You guys were chatting and not really paying attention. They were like, no, we were collaborating. They showed them the document, and sure enough, the two of them were taking notes together. And these were kind of things that just came to the students naturally. And so it's kind of this giving time to explore and allowing teachers that ability to try new things. And they get these aha moments, and all of a sudden it clicks and things start to change. And it really, that really is kind of the big thing, is that you need the time, you need kind of the energy to keep going and kind of making sure, because after about 4 to 6 months, that's when it kind of flips.
I love that story about the two students collaborating. That's great.